Hello there folks, back again for another video. In this one we're going to be talking a little bit about, who would have thought it, Space Wolves, since that's what I've been working on over the last little while when it comes to hobby. I thought I would dive in and share my thoughts on Space Wolves, hobbying with Space Wolves, and also where I see things going in the future for them as we look towards the rest of 10th edition and where things can go. So one of the things that I've been working on recently is I've been doing the combat patrol for the Space Wolves, which is this set here. And like a lot of the combat patrols that have been done for the Space Marines, it contains a whole host of primaris age Space Marines, effectively. None of the old crop have been added into these. And we've seen them for the Blood Angels and the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves. And in the case of the Blood Angels and the Dark Angels ones, there's nothing essentially within those sets that you could mark out as being definitively from those factions, and very much they are done in such a way that they can be almost retrofitted and changed later on down the line, probably, so that we're going to see a lot more stuff coming out for them and maybe new combat patrols as those codexes are released. The Space Wolves one at least has a battle leader, has a pack leader for you to drop in that kind of fits into the theme of the Space Wolves. But beyond that, it's not really a set that necessarily screams Space Wolves beyond the shoulder pads and some of the extra bits and pieces they put in for some of the Primaris upgrade sprues. And this brought me to an issue that I've had when it comes to hobbying with the Space Wolves over the last little while. So I've always wanted a Space Wolf army, and I definitely wanted one throughout like 6th, 7th and 8th, I guess you'd say. But I was never really in a place where I was like, I definitely want to dive in and build this army. And also a friend of mine had a Space Wolf army, so it didn't really make sense for me to have one as well. But as we moved into sort of 9th edition and then into 10th, I was really enamored by the idea of doing Space Wolves. And I've always loved these classic kits, that sort of standard Space Marine look that everyone's familiar with, but with all of the awesome added details that they put onto the different sprues for you to make really awesome looking Space Wolf characters. You had all those really cool characterful heads, all the pelts and the tabards, the daggers, the wolf-themed bolters and all that kind of thing. Even all the runic symbols etched onto all their weapons and stuff. It was such a really nice kit to play around with. And when you had cookie cutter style Space Marines as standard for the most part, it was good to have a chapter that felt so very, very different from everything else that was out there. And the same goes for the Blood Claws and the Green Hunters and everything else that they did really for the range. Even the Wolf Guard Terminators, really awesome kit, this one. And it was just nice seeing all the extra bits and pieces that they threw into the mix with this to really ram home the idea of it being Space Wolves. Now, obviously, that was great for previous editions of the game, but when we moved into 9th and 10th edition, we got the primarisification, I guess you'd say, of the various Space Wolves, well, various Space Marines, and in particular the Space Wolves as well. Ragnar Blackbane has obviously crossed the Rubicon Primaris as well, after his fateful encounter with Ghazghkull Tharak. Mag Uruk Tharak, sorry, I'll get his full name out there. And we got the Primaris upgrade sprue as well, which was this one, which was used for you to kind of make your troops look a little bit more in line with the Space Wolves of old, even though everything was very just bland Primaris Space Marines, you know, that standard armor that everyone's very familiar with, and you know, sticking a shoulder pad on it apparently made it into a Space Wolf, which was a little bit of a shame for me. And it meant that when it came to doing an army for the Space Wolves, I had to look further afield when it came to getting the bits that I wanted to use. And you've seen some of those if you've watched any of my 13th Company build series, which I think 2 episodes are out on the channel at the moment, and there will be another one later in the week. So I was having to go to the likes of Grey Tide Studio to get my bits and stuff in order to make my Space Marines feel a little bit more in line with the vibe that we got from older editions, but with the newer models. Because that's another one of the things that's one of the that sticks with me when it comes to where Space Marines are in 9th edition, is that you want to be playing with the new stuff. You want to be playing with the primaris. Primaris look and feel bigger and stronger, and they're more in line with the idea of Space Marines on the tabletop and in the lore. You know, they stand head and shoulders above a regular mortal. They have that presence to them. They have a lot more dynamism in there as well. And so you want those new models, and as well, because, you know, the rules are also great for those models as well. So there is a reason to have them. But if you look towards collecting a Primaris Space Wolf army, unless you go out of your way to get your hands on a lot of these kits, picking up loads and loads and loads of these little additional sets so that you can throw in some heads in, of which there are 2 additional quirky ones, or maybe you go for one of these older sets, which would still work in some cases with the kits that are available for the Primaris Space Marines, you're going to find yourselves a little bit of a loss when it comes to actually having a nice looking army if you go official. And so you're driven to third-party companies, which is no bad thing. I love what Grey Tide do, but it means that if you are someone who likes playing in Games Workshop stores or likes playing in Warhammer World and that kind of thing, you're kind of limited in terms of what you can actually take with you, unless you kind of, well, hide it well under a mask of paint, I guess. But even then, I'm fairly sure a lot of people will be pointing out, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't look right, that looks like it's from something else, etc., etc., etc. And so the Space Wolves find themselves in a strange position where their army could feel amazing for 10th edition, but it's still stuck in the past. Now, we've looked at like all the other, I guess you'd say, Codex compliant chapters, like the Ultramarines and the Imperial Fists and the Raven Guard and all that kind of thing. They're all fine. They're serviced really, really well with what already exists out there. And in most cases, a lick of paint, some transfers, maybe a few bits and pieces, and the choice of specialist weapons here and there can really make a difference. There are other chapters, though, that aren't Codex compliant, that would fit into their sort of supplementary codexes, I suppose you'd say, where the vibe for them just isn't there yet. Like, I think Blood Angels suffered a fair amount because, you know, you can paint things red and all that kind of stuff, but then again, you're missing out on some of the awesome stuff being primarisified effectively. So your Sanguinary Guard are still the old models, and they're going to look like dwarfs compared to the new Primaris Space Marines. The Dark Angels have a similar issue as well, I think, in that their Deathwing Terminators still feel outclassed by the new Terminators and the new look of those. Obviously, that's a more recent change. But even then, just your regular Primaris Space Marines, you're going to have to go out of your way to get additional upgrade kits and all that kind of thing in order to really hammer home the vibe of the armies that you're trying to create. Never mind all the other specialist stuff that's meant to be coming out for them, which might be dropping with their new Codex, I guess. Black Templars, though, are an interesting look at where Games Workshop have taken the idea of a non-Codex compliant chapter and really thrown their weight behind it in order to update them and bring them to the tabletop, which I think is really nice. And that's the kind of thing that I think is going to happen when it comes to the Space Wolves, because they are a range that is in desperate need of getting that mighty kick up the arse when it comes to design and look and feel. So one of the things that was quite interesting was that in the 9th edition Codex, you can see this made manifest. That is a Primaris Space Marine, and if you're going by scale, which is about right, that is a classic Space Wolf Bloodclaw, right? So immediately you're seeing the difference. Now, yes, you can do sort of bits bashing and all that kind of thing in order to make your own models. So that's just taking one of the heads from the older sets and sort of bolting it onto a Primaris Space Marine. That works perfectly well, right? And I think there's a couple more characters. So here we go. So there is a Primaris Wolf Priest, which is, again, a conversion. But one of the things that's really interesting about this, is you've had to go to so much effort within the Games Workshop range in order to bring that to life. And I don't, as I said, I don't mind kitbashing and I don't mind converting. I love it, right? But when it gets to the stage where you're like, well, I'm just going to use this Primaris kit, and then I have to go through all this extra work to actually turn it into a Space Wolf kit, it starts to put people off the idea of actually playing the army. And so one of the things that was quite interesting that popped up in the lore in the 9th edition Codex was somewhere near the front. Is it this one? Yes, here we go. So the wolf will out. So this was an interesting little box art that was included in the 9th edition Codex when it came. And it was how the Primaris Space Marines were initially viewed with an edge of contempt or wariness when it came to whether or not they'd be ingratiated into the chapter and used amongst the rest of the forces. But there's elements lower down where they've actually talked about how young and impetuous warriors get classed as Bloodclaws. The more veteran warriors get classed as Grey Hunters and all that kind of thing. And those that would prefer to be alone or be loners and that kind of stuff get moved into the Wolf Scouts. And then obviously the most honoured warriors get moved into being the Wolf Guard. So there is this move towards the Primaris Space Marines being effectively the rank and file of what the Space Wolves are. And I just think they need to get just a vibe update across the board to match with the new scale and size of the Primaris Space Marines on the tabletop. So looking at this, I think there would be nothing wrong with retiring these old kits, just moving them out to pasture, forgetting that they are part of the line, taking some of the elements that have been used throughout this, like the sort of loincloths and the armor designs and all that kind of thing, and do something similar to what we saw with the Black Templars, where we get a very heavily themed kit that is Space Wolf Intercessors or Space Wolf Assault Intercessors or something like that. And effectively, they just become the Bloodclaws. Maybe you just call it the Bloodclaws upgrade set or the Grey Hunters upgrade set, and it can just be built onto or included with a Primaris Intercessors box set, and you just cobble it all together, and away you go. They then just become Bloodclaws, they become Grey Hunters and all that kind of thing, and you play around with their sort of weapons and all that kind of stuff, so you're able to put in the likes of plasma guns and flamers and rocket launchers and all that kind of things in order to make them into the units that people remember from those older codexes. It seems like that's going to be some kind of inevitability, I guess. It feels like it's going to be a very, very long time off, and it's one of those things that, again, is putting me off diving deeper into the range beyond the Combat Patrol. Another of the units that just feels like it either needs to be entirely reworked or given a huge, like, here's the upgrade sprue for this, is the Space Wolf Terminators, the Wolf Guard. So this kit's been around for a while, and it looks great. It's fantastic. Comes with loads of really nice weapon options and that kind of thing. But next to the new Terminators, they feel like dwarves, and they totally need to get redone. Again, maybe you do this through the use of a Wolf Guard upgrade sprue that can be used alongside the Assault Terminators that are going to be coming out, or the regular Terminators that already exist, or you literally just make a new box set, because people will buy it. If you have wolf-themed armor, if you have all the extra stuff that comes with the Wolf Guard, but you just make them Primarisified, I think people would go bananas for it. There is a case to be made that maybe this is something that just won't happen in 10th, and that too much needs to be done to turn the Space Wolves into an army that feels modern. In which case, maybe we look towards 3 years down the line, 3.5 years down the line, where we get a new box set. We have a new push for a new Primarch. We see Russ come back, either as kind of like Grandfather Odin Russ or Werewolf Russ, whichever way you want to go with it. And he returns, and we get a big range refresh for the Space Wolves, a little bit like what we saw for some of the armies that have been catered to over the last little while when it came to Necrons and Tyranids. Because I think genuinely, as much as it's like, oh, more Space Marines, Space Wolves feel so iconic and unique and different. Having access to all this extra stuff for them just makes sense in my mind when it comes to building them as a viable fighting force. The other thing that is really hampering the Space Wolves for collectors at the moment is that so much of their range, namely things like this, or the Wolf Lords and that kind of stuff, and all their special and a lot of their special characters, apart from a few, like Ragnar's plastic and Crom Dragonglaze is plastic, I think, but the rest of them are fine cast models, and there's just something about that I think again is going to be turning a lot of people off from diving in and playing around with this. Another thing that's quite interesting to me as well, as someone who collects 13th Company and loves that kind of thing, especially with the sort of push towards the Wolfen, is when it comes to those models, nice, dynamic to a degree. I think they look a bit weird. I still prefer the older aesthetic of the Wolfen, but I would love to see a push towards them getting redone and updated. I doubt they will, but we'll see where that goes as well. But yeah, lots of things that need doing. As a little bit of a recap, obviously, just go through this. So, Space Wolves as a force, very intriguing to collect if you're someone who wants a characterful chapter to play of Space Marines. Really interesting and diverse rules that change the way that you play. The sagas, while I know a lot of people don't consider them to be a particularly strong set of sort of chapter-specific rules for the Space Wolves, feel very in line with the kind of chapter that they are and the kind of army that you're playing. So the rules are there, even though we're missing a whole bunch of stuff. So you have Iron Priest listed as part of their the data slates and stuff. But if you want to do Wolf Priests, if you want to do Rune Priests, you literally just have to go out and buy Primaris Librarians or Primaris Chaplains and redo them and retheme them in your with bits that you found on the internet or as part of these upgrade sprees and that kind of thing. So the kernel of great rules and very characterful rules are there, but there's still lots of things missing from that. Another thing I wanted to mention, actually, that's just come to my mind, I absolutely loved, I think it was 8th edition, and maybe before that as well, had the Lone Wolves rule, which were kind of like slayers for the Space Wolves. Those people that were trying to atone for some kind of sin and were charging out into the battlefield to die in glorious battle. Really awesome. Could literally just have like a dude kitted out to the nines with like wolven companions, and away you go. Great, fantastic, really awesome stuff. But yes, so there's lots of things that need to be done in terms of profiles. From a hobby point of view, absolutely fantastic for somebody who wants to spend the time kit bashing and converting and building up the army in different ways. But it's a real effort to do that. You either have to double up the amount of kits you buy, or you need to go through bit sellers, or you need to go to third-party creators like Great-Eyed here to get your hands on things that will make your army feel like Space Wolves. Because currently, this and this just don't cut it in my mind when it comes to the themes that you're trying to rock on the tabletop. Beyond that, obviously, as we said, updating and tweaking things when it comes to what are Blood Claws, what are Grey Hunters, how do you want to play around with that, Long Fangs, Sky Claws. As I say, as you start to look at all these different titles and all these different names, things just start to get more and more in depth in terms of how much the range needs to be upgraded. Wolfguard Terminators, again, were a prime example of that. You've also got all of those Finecast characters that I was mentioning that they desperately need to be updated and tweaked and brought back to the tabletop in plastic in some new form. Because, tell you what, I would absolutely love to get my hands on an Arjak Rockfist, but am I buying a Finecast version of him? Heck no. Unless someone can tell me that they have totally updated the way that Finecast works, and it's just done with a new style of resin like the Forge Rod stuff, I ain't touching that. The last Finecast stuff that I picked up was Uruk-hai, and their swords were bent and broken as hell. So yeah, not going anywhere near that at the moment. Once all of that is done, I think the Space Wolves will feel like they're in a great place. Does that mean that this kind of epicness is out of the reach of people at the moment? No. I still think there's the option and the chance for people to dive in and be able to make some really fascinating and interesting armies of Space Wolves on the tabletop. A lot of the core groundwork has still been done. I really like a lot of their core characters like Crom that we saw there, really awesome. And Ragnar has been really wicked to see come back to the tabletop. You've also got that new, there was a new plastic set for Ulrich as well. So and Logan Grimnar riding around in his Christmas chariot. He's not to be forgotten. So yeah, there is definitely stuff out there that is looking pretty good. It's just, I think things are in need of a massive update. It's not going to be easy. There's lots of things that need doing. There's themed kits that need creating, and it's possibly why they are taking their time with this. But I could see them doing some really awesome stuff with the Space Wolves in the future, and people absolutely loving it. I know a lot of people, again, say boo Space Wolves quite a lot, but I think a lot of people are also very much in the camp of, aren't Space Wolves pretty cool when it comes to these power armored warriors, especially if they can go down the route of creating some really interesting stuff in terms of their detachments and making some very different ones based on maybe a few of the great companies. I think it could be really, really cool to see where they go with this. Also, if you have got the 9th edition Codex, or you can find it, it has a name generator in the back, which is very cool. But yeah, make sure that you drop your thoughts down in the comments below, because I think the Space Wolves are a really unique Space Marine force that is in desperate need of getting upgraded and updated. I didn't even mention Wolf Lords. They're bloody resin. Or I think they're resin anyway. Or at least some of the characters are anyway. So like Canis Wolfborn and Harold Deathwolf. If you're going to be trying to make a wolf-based army, you're going to have to go through a lot of that before you get to the plastic stuff. Although it's nice to see that all the friend resin wolves and all that kind of stuff is, of course, plastic, which is good. But anyway, lots of things that need updating for the Space Wolves. It feels like it's going to take a while before that becomes a reality. But in the meantime, I would love to hear what your thoughts are down below for them as a chapter. Do you like the Space Wolves? Would you like to see Games Workshop do something fun with them? And how exactly do you reckon they're going to do it? Will it be something that happens throughout the era of 10th edition, or is it something that's going to be sort of kept back for the start of 11th perhaps, and the change there? But lots of legendary characters that are going to need a pretty big update if people want to start using them on the tabletop. Maybe it's time to move on and add some new leaders to these different grey companies. That might be a way to go, although that sounds quite heretical to say. But yes. Yeah. Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And yeah, as someone who is just getting back into Space Wolves and absolutely loving my time with it and playing around with all the bits and pieces that I can, I just thought I'd get my thoughts out there in terms of where I'd want to see the chapter go in the future. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. As always, comment, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And if you like what I do, there's also a Ko-fi link down there as well if you want to donate to help me with my Space Wolf obsession. But I'm going to move on, dive into some more content for you folks, and I'll be back with another video very, very soon. Bye for now.